Hello, I am Shivaji Bhaskar, Faculty of Russian at the School of Foreign Languages, IGNOU. I welcome you all to this course, Basics of Russian Communication Skills, Part 1. As you know that in our previous modules, we have discussed about various aspects of the Russian grammar. We have discussed about certain cases of the Russian case system. We have discussed about the special case of the masculine, feminine and neuter gender, in which we have discussed about certain nouns and adjectives which indicates possession, belonging and negation. Now in this module we will be discussing about a very special element of the Russian grammar which we use as katori. Katori, which denotes possession, belonging or negation, and after using u, which indicates proximity, such as okla, naprotiv, mima, nutri, vakrug, is, at, sa and the. All these elements will be used in this module in order to understand the usage of katori. And as you know, in Russian we have masculine, feminine and neuter gender. Likewise, the usage of katori will also change. For masculine it would be katori, for neuter it would be katore, and for feminine it would be katoraya. However, these three expressions are used in the nominative, and when we talk about something which denotes possession, belonging and negation, katori, katore and katoraya shall change as per the rules of the grammar which we have learned in the previous module. Alright, now let us go ahead and pay attention to a few important exercises. Please pay attention to the model. Человек у есть эта книга, живет недалеко. So whenever we are saying человек у and there we have a blank, есть книга, живет недалеко. So the person who has this book lives not very far. So whose, this expression can be used in Russian with the help of katori, but since we are talking about possession, belonging, that is why katori will change as per the rules of the grammar into katorava. So человек, у которого есть эта книга, живет недалеко. So this is the right answer while we use katori. Then pay attention to the next sentence. Park около, then we have a blank, находится этот магазин не очень большой. So park около, masculine gender, so katori will change again as per the rules of the grammar into которого находится этот магазин не очень большой. So that is why we are using the usage of katori in different forms. However, in these two present examples we have used katori in masculine, and according to the possession or belonging it has changed to katorava. Now let's go ahead and pay attention to a few more such examples. Девушка. Now девушка in nominative is a word of feminine gender, and like we have learned about how the ending of the adjectives will change, likewise katori will also change as per the rules of the grammar. So девушка blank нет в комнате, работает на втором этаже. So девушка, the girl, которой нет в комнате, the girl who is not in the room, работает на втором этаже, works on the second floor. So as per the rules of the grammar, katori, because it is a feminine gender noun, has changed into katoraya, and as per the rules of the grammar, for indicating possession or belonging, the ending changes into katorai. Now let's take the third example. Rika мимо blank мысли очень красивая. So Rika mima, Rika is a feminine gender word, so katori will also change into katoraya and as per the rules of the grammar in this case will change as который мысли очень красивое здание. Now we have an example of neuter gender. So здание внутри, then we have a blank, находится эти магазины очень большое. So здание, building, внутри, inside which, внутри которого находятся эти магазины, inside which these shops are situated, очень большое, very big. So this is the complete expression where we have seen the examples of masculine, feminine as well as neuter gender, and we have seen that который, которая, которое is being changed as которого, которой and которого. So I hope that this concept is absolutely clear to you all. Now we shall go ahead and pay attention to a few more examples. Another example of feminine gender. Моя знакомая у blank есть эта книга живет в Бангалоре. So here моя знакомая, so it indicates that my known, it's a female because of the ending моя знакомая. Who, so here который will change into которая, and as per the rule of the grammar here for indicating possession or belonging as которой есть эта книга живет в Бангалоре. So you can also see rest of the examples and change them as per the rules of the grammar which we have learned in this module. Okay, now let's go ahead and pay attention to a few more examples. Театр напротив blank находится наш дом. Очень известный. So театр masculine gender напротив которого находится наш дом очень известный. So likewise you can also change the rest of the examples which we have given to you for the exercises. We are absolutely sure that you would solve them very properly. Okay, now let's go ahead and pay attention to a few more such examples. Центральная почта вокруг, then we have a blank, есть эти магазины находятся на соседней улице. So центральная почта, feminine gender, вокруг которой есть эти магазины находятся на соседней улице. So you can also change the sentences where we have the noun of feminine gender. Now let's go to the next section. In this section we will be discussing about the comparative forms of adjectives. In order to understand the comparative forms of adjectives, which indicates that when we are using two different kind of adjectives, we are saying that this is better than that, this is higher than that, or this is louder than that. So these kind of comparisons actually fall into this category. To understand it properly, let's pay attention to the model. Эта задача труднее, чем та задача. So this task is tougher than that task. So we use чем to indicate the comparative form of adjective. Let's pay attention to the second one. Тот роман интереснее, чем этот роман. So that novel is more interesting than this novel. Then the third one. эта задача труднее той задачи. Here we are using эта задача труднее той задачи. So here we are changing чем into the adjective ending of задача with той. Тот роман интереснее этого романа. Because роман masculine gender, that is why we have used этого романа. So I hope you would be able to make the difference between the usage of чем and replacing them with то, этот and та. Okay, now let's go ahead and pay attention to a few more examples. The comparative form of adjectives трудный, which means difficult, is trudnyaye. So trudni changes into trudnyaye to indicate the comparative form, and both the sentences have the same meaning, which means the task is more difficult than the other. The only expressions of indicating them are different. In first case we have used chim, in second case we have used toy. There is no change in the ending of the word combination tazadacha because of the use of chim, which means then. However, in absence of chim, tazadacha takes the form of chivo. That is why we have changed tazadacha into toizadachi depending upon the usage of the rules of the grammar which we have learned, which indicates possession or belonging. Similarly, the word combination for etatraman remains unchanged and becomes etavaraman because masculine gender, and although both sentences carry the same meaning, the novel is more interesting than this novel. The reflection is simply just to understand the comparative forms of adjectives. Now let's pay attention to some of the adjectives and their comparative form. We have many different kinds of adjectives which we find in different sentences. Now we will compare it. The first one is trudni. We all know what does trudni means. It means difficult. So the comparative form would be trudnyaye, then interesny, which means interesting. Comparative form would be interesnyaye, which means more interesting. Then bystre, which means fast, and bystreye, which means faster. Likewise, medlinny, which means slow, medlinnyaye, which means slower, biedny, which means poor, bednyaye, poorer. Then silny means strong, and the comparative form is silnyaye, which means stronger, and slabi, which means weak, and slabyaye, which means weaker. So accordingly, all these you have seen what is the comparative form, that all these are changing as per a standard rule. Another important thing which you have to understand is that all these adjectives presently are in the form of masculine gender. But at the same time, when we are listening to all these changing of different forms of adjectives, now there are some exceptions, like большой. So it changes into больше. Большой, which means big, changes into больше, which means bigger. Маленький means small, changes into меньше, means smaller. Высокий, which means tall, changes into выше, which means taller. Низкий, which means low, changes into ниже, which means lower. Старший, which means old, changes into старше, which means elder. Младший, which means young, changes into младше, which means younger. Далекий, which means far, and дальше means further. Близкий, which means near, changes into ближе, which means nearer. And легкий, which means easy, changes into легче, which means easier. And accordingly, as per the rules of the grammar, you have seen that how we have changed various forms of adjectives. Now let's pay attention to a few more examples. Novi, which means new, changes into novel. And here you can see a list of more adjectives with their comparative forms, such as novi, which means new, changes into noveye, which means new year. Красивый, which means beautiful, changes into красивее, which means more beautiful. Then черный, which means black, changes into чернее, which means more black. Светлый, which means bright, changes into светлее, which means brighter. Белый, which means white, changes into белее, which means more white. Известный, which means famous, changes into известнее, which means more famous. Крупный, which means big, changes into крупнее, which means bigger. Талантливый, which means talented, changes into талантливее, which means more talented. and chomni changes into chimnyaye, which means dark, changes into darker. Opitni, which means experience, changes into opitnyaye, which means more experienced. Likewise, we have kharoshi, but it changes into lutsche. So there are many other forms of adjectives which can also be counted as exceptions, but we do remember them as per the usage. Plakhoi, which means bad, changes into khuzhe, which means worse. Daragoy means expensive, changes into darozhe, which means more expensive. Then maladoi, which means young, changes into malozhe, which means younger. Gromki, which means loud, changes into gromche, which means louder. Chiki, which means quiet, changes into chishe, which means quieter. Shiroki, which means wide, changes into shire, which means wider. Uzki means narrow, changes into ushe, which means narrower. Katrotki means short, changes into karoche, means shorter. Jishovi means cheap, changes into jishavliye, means cheaper. Dlinni, which means long, changes into dlinyaye, which means longer. Alright, with the help of these many examples of adjectives with their comparative forms, we have quite a few numbers with which we can make a lot of sentences. So, we would like to recommend you all to use all these examples in your sentences with your family and friends so that you can understand them properly and converse in Russian with efficiency. Now let's go ahead and pay attention to a few more examples. Alright, since we have learned about many comparative forms of adjectives, now we will have an activity to understand how all these adjectives can be used in sentences. Now let's translate the following sentences with the help of chem and without it. Model: he writes better than me. He writes пишет better than me, лучше чем я, or он пишет лучше меня. So we have two categories, он пишет лучше чем я, and at the same time we have another example, он пишет лучше меня. The only difference is the usage of grammar. However, the meaning of sentences are same. Then the second one is, she is younger to my sister, она моложе чем моя сестра. We can also use the same expression in different form, она моложе моей сестры. So моя сестра changes into моей сестры. Then the third one is, our building is higher than that building. Наше здание выше чем то здание. Or we can also use it as наше здание выше того здания. So the difference is that when we are using чем and when we are making sentences without using чем, the only difference is that a particular word which indicates the noun is changing. Now let's go ahead and pay attention to a few more examples. Please pay attention to the model. Мои друзья добрее, чем он. Мои друзья добрее, чем он. So in this case, you can see that for making the comparative form, we have used добрый as добрее. Accordingly, let's pay attention to the second example. Эта страна богаче, чем в той стране. So богатая, we have used богаче. Okay, now let's go ahead and pay attention. So here we have a few more examples, the comparative forms of adjectives. Он пишет медленно, но она пишет медленнее. Студент говорит быстро, но студентка говорит быстрее. Here медленно has been changed into медленнее, which means slow and slower, and быстро has been changed into быстрее, which means fast and faster. Likewise, we have examples like хорошо changes into лучше, плохо хуже, медленно медленнее, быстро быстрее, громко громче, and тихо тише. Now let's go ahead and pay attention to the model. In this model, you can see that we have used a sentence он читает громко, he reads loud. Он читает громче, and he reads louder. So in this case we have the comparative forms of adjectives. Она пишет медленно, она пишет медленнее. Эти рабочие строят быстро, эти рабочие строят быстрее. Accordingly, all these endings of the adjectives would change as per the requirement of the comparative forms of adjectives. Now let's go ahead and pay attention to another important aspect. We will be taking plural nouns which indicates possession, belonging and negation. Now, because so far we have seen nouns only in the singular form. So, in order to understand the plural forms of nouns, we have to look at the different aspects of these nouns. Because so far we have seen the nouns in masculine, feminine and neuter, but once we change the nouns in plural, then the endings also changes. Now let's see with the help of a few examples. In Russian, we use several nouns to express meaning in a sentence. These nouns can also be used in plural form to express possession, belonging and negation. To understand these plural forms of nouns in possession, belonging and negation, now let's go through a text on Anton Chekhov, a very famous Russian writer, and with the help of a few examples we will be discussing about the plural form of nouns. Среди русских писателей XIX века Антон Чехов занимает особое место. Он родился в 1860 году в городе Таганроге. Чехов начал писать очень рано. Он тогда еще учился на медицинском факультете Московского университета. В начале своей творческой жизни он писал в основном маленькие смешные рассказы на страницах различных газет и юмористических журналов. Главная задача молодого писателя была такова развлекать своих читателей. Характерная черта рассказов этого периода – исключительная лаконичность или краткость. Молодой писатель очень любил краткости и часто говорил: краткость – это сестра таланта. Во своих маленьких рассказах Чехов сумел передать очень много, показал разные стороны человеческой жизни, разоблачал разные пороки русского общества тогдашнего времени. Некоторые рассказы этого периода, как «Смерть чиновника», «Толстый тонкий», «Хамелеон», «Маска», носят остро сатирический характер и имеют огромное социальное значение. Смешное в этих рассказах не только развлекает читателей, но и заставляет их задуматься. В конце 80-х годов XIX века начинается второй период творческой жизни Чехова. В рассказах этого периода, то есть в рассказах зрелого Чехова, теперь уже нет острых событий, нет драматического сюжета, нет сюрпризного финала. Показывается жизнь, как она есть. Изображается ее сложность, ее противоречивость. Палата номер 6. Душечка невеста. Антон Чехов также написал великолепные пьесы. Самые известные его пьесы – это «Чайка», «Три сестры», «Вишневый сад» и «Дядя Ваня». Чеховский герой – это самый обыкновенный человек, но в этом обыкновенном человеке показал необыкновенную красоту, красота жизни. Вот центральная тема чеховских рассказов. So here, with the help of this text, we have gone through many plural forms of nouns in possession and belonging. Now let's pay attention to some of the examples. Дом художников очень красивый. So we will have the questions like чей, чья, чье and чьи. So дом художников. Here художник has been changed into the plural form художников. That is why it is plural. Now let's go ahead and pay attention to a few more examples. Комната братьев находится на втором этаже. So brat has been changed into plural братьев. Чья комната находится на втором этаже. Brat takes the form of братьев for indicating possession and belonging. Общежитие аспирантов находится там. Here aspirant has taken the plural form of аспирантов. The question would remain чье общежитие находится там. Аспирантов. Then квартиры друзей очень большие. So here we have друзья changes into друзей and the question would be чьи. Because квартиры. From квартира the plural form is квартиры. So likewise you can also place чей, чья, чье and чьи and use them in your sentences. Now let's go ahead and pay attention to a few more examples. У товарищей есть новые машины. So the question is, у кого есть новые машины? У товарищей. So товарищ takes the plural form. Товарищей. When the question is, у кого? Likewise, у студентов есть другая столовая. У кого есть другая столовая? У студентов. So student takes the form of студентов, which is the plural form. Now let's go ahead and pay attention to a few more examples. Комнаты домов очень маленькие. So дом takes the plural form домов. Качество стульев очень хорошее. Stool takes the plural form of стульев. Likewise, страницы словарей нехорошие. So словарь takes the plural form of словарей. Okay, I hope the concept is clear to you all now. You can also make the singular into plural as far as the nouns are concerned and use them in your sentences. So, in this module, we have discussed about two important aspects. The comparative form of adjectives, where we have seen the usage of chem and we have made sentences without. We have seen the usage of different adjectives and how they are changed, like быстро – быстрее, хорошо – лучше, дорого – дороже, легко – легче, etc. So, we recommend you all to note all these important aspects in your notebooks and practice them with your family and friends in order to understand them clearly. And the second concept was the usage of katori. In that we have seen that how katori as per the gender of the noun changes and how in the case of possession or belonging they are being used as katorava, katorai and katorava for masculine, feminine, neuter. Then at the end of the module we have seen the usage of plural forms of nouns in this particular case. I hope you will remember all these three and will practice in order to understand them in a better way. I hope you all enjoyed it. We will be doing more such exercises in our upcoming module. Thank you.